Lordstown Motors is moving quickly to making vehicles.
We've completely reinvented the pickup truck here.
And this is the only one that does this in the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Lordstown Endurance.
If you've ever wondered what the future will look like, well, you can rest assured it isn't this. The Lordstown Endurance was an all-electric, four-door crew cab work truck sitting on an innovative platform designed to overtake the Ford F-150 and become the #1 selling vehicle in America. Its success was dependent on three key claims. The Lordstown Endurance will be the world's first electric pickup truck. The Lordstown Endurance's hub motor technology will give it a huge advantage, and because of this, the Lordstown Endurance will thus be in high demand from vehicle fleet managers. Today we'll analyze not only how, but also why the Endurance failed to meet these claims, and the events that led up to the various scandals, catastrophic failures, and ultimate bankruptcy of the company. Welcome to Voltage Valley. The design for the Endurance was passed down from a long tree of companies, though its father was always a man named Stephen S. Burns. After spending the early 2000s founding multiple telecom companies, Burns decided to try his hand at electric drivetrain technology in 2007, founding the AMP electric vehicles brand. AMP EV converted passenger vehicles, like the Jeep Grand Cherokee, from internal combustion to fully electric. The upgraded cars would then be sold at a handsome premium. Things changed in 2013 when AMP acquired EV truck manufacturer Workhorse, assuming their name as well as their custom chassis plant. Workhorse would give birth to their own plug-in hybrid pickup prototype in 2016, the W15. Beneath its clunky exterior, the W15 used a basic skateboard foundation with floor-mounted battery packs, front and rear electric motors providing all-wheel drive, and a range-extending gas motor from BMW, the same one used in the i3. Burns went out of his way to state that the W15 was a completely new vehicle, and not a conversion like their other products. Although that didn't stop articles from pointing out some suspicious similarities to the GMC Sierra. It ultimately wouldn't matter, as the W15 would never reach production. Instead, Burns abruptly left Workhorse in 2019 to pursue a new business opportunity, purchasing the Lordstown, Ohio vehicle assembly plant from General Motors. This would be the foundation of Burns' second EV brand, Lordstown Motors. While Workhorse continued to focus on the delivery van and electric mail truck industry, Burns hoped to pursue the passenger vehicle market with Lordstown, immediately orchestrating the exchange of the unused W15 blueprints to his new company. Lordstown redesigned the W15 and finally granted it the name Endurance, I guess because the old moniker sounded like a tax filing. Although the journey of the Endurance from AMP to Workhorse to Lordstown may look like a messy game of Agario, the important thing to realize is that the Endurance prototype had roots stretching all the way back to 2016. Because of this, much of the development work had already been completed, and Burns hoped Lordstown could speedrun the redesign and bring a finished product to market in just a few months, targeting a production date of December 2020, and at one point saying they hoped to make 20,000 in the first year. This was critical to their claim that the Endurance would be the first electric pickup truck in the world.
Our goal is to be the first electric pickup truck.
The first fully electric pickup.
It's the first full-size all-electric work truck.
To building what will be the world's first all-electric pickup truck.
Well, it would be the first if you ignored the Zap Zebra, Ford Ranger EV, Chevy S10 EV, Via V-Trucks, GGT Scout, Dongfeng Rich 6, and the Neighborhood EV. Although since most of these were produced in small quantities and a few not even street legal, Lordstown fans were willing to overlook them and grant credence to the claims nonetheless. The other key component of this claim, as well as the namesake of the company, was the vehicle manufacturing plant in Lordstown, Ohio. The complex had been owned and operated by General Motors since 1966, providing critical economic support to the local area for decades. That support ended in 2019, when GM halted production of the Chevy Cruze, making the Lordstown assembly complex obsolete. Rather than close the plant permanently, and be forced to refund the state with up to $60 million in subsidies, as well as face prolonged union strikes and negative press, GM instead made a deal to pawn off the factory to Burns, and thus Voltage Valley was born. With everything in place, Lordstown was finally situated to take the electric truck market by storm, and they officially debuted the Endurance in a live event during June 2020. Production was now slated to begin a little later than originally expected, now scheduled for September 2021. In order to fund the final few months of development crunch and the following production ramp, Lordstown Motors went public via a reverse merger with the Diamond Peak Holdings SPAC. A SPAC, or Special Purpose Acquisition Company, is a corporation created to raise investment money so that it can merge with some innovative new brand. Diamond Peak itself had no business operations. They were essentially a shell company that went to the trouble of becoming publicly listed on the stock exchange and sought out investors with the promise of ultimately converting their shares in the SPAC into shares of an exciting new business. In this case, that business ended up being Lordstown Motors. The important part of all this is that Lordstown went public under the ticker RIDE and was handed a $675 million investment to fund their production launch. In their press release, the company confidently stated this was all they would need to bring the Endurance to market and generate positive cash flows. At the end of 2020, things were looking about as bright as they could. The company received 50,000 reservations for the Endurance. Retooling started at the Lordstown assembly plant, service centers were being put up across the country, politicians gave their blessing, the stock soared, and Burns smiled. But little did he know, the following year would be the toughest Lordstown had ever faced, and the start of an unraveling that would ultimately destroy not only his company, but his career and his reputation. The year had hardly started. In the cover of darkness on January 13th, 2021, 3 engineers took an Endurance prototype for a test run on the streets of Detroit. They had barely traveled more than a mile from the Lordstown R&D Center when the driver noticed something wrong with the truck. After pulling over, the trio spotted a flame underneath the vehicle. Within minutes, the truck was engulfed. By the time the fire department arrived, the hood had completely melted, and the truck was beyond salvaging. Nobody was hurt in the incident. Nobody except the prestige of Lordstown Motors. The incident immediately sowed doubt among investors and potential customers alike, as the reliability of Lordstown's technology was called into question. The company passed blame onto human error during the building process, something that would be resolved when the production line was up and running. But the damage had already been done to the company's reputation. Fortunately, the disastrous event would be nearly forgotten a month later, but only because something far more scandalous occurred. Hindenburg Research is a company that specializes in forensic financial research. Trust me, it's a lot cooler than it sounds. Step 1. Uncover some publicly available, yet hitherto undiscovered, dirt on a company. Maybe some accounting irregularities, undisclosed transactions, or unethical reporting practices. Step 2. Take out a sizable short position on said company. Compile a 9,486-word essay detailing your discoveries and precise allegations against them, and publish it to the world. Step whatever, the stock crashes as a result, your short position is over the moon, you've made millions and saved the world from another dirty scammer. Hindenburg Research has done it dozens of times, notably highlighting fraudulent activity in other EV brands, including the historic Nikola semi-truck fiasco. Their report on Lordstown was published on March 12, 2021, alleging that Burns had exaggerated his claims about the company's pre-order book, which had gone from 50,000 in November to 100,000 just a few months later. Rather than very serious orders, as Burns claimed they were, Hindenburg argued that many of these pre-orders were non-binding favors to the company, unrealistic letters of intent, or generally fictitious. In particular, the essay highlights a $735 million deal with E-Squared Energy Advisors. The 14,000 trucks they had ordered were part of a non-binding agreement which Hindenburg seemed to believe would never be fulfilled. I would tend to agree, considering E-Squared was a relatively new startup comprised of 2 employees and based out of the founder's 700 square foot residential apartment. Needless to say, they did not operate their own vehicle fleets, and likely couldn't afford a nearly billion-dollar order of 14,000 Lordstown Endurances. The scathing Hindenburg report didn't stop there, but went on to highlight similar instances of inflated and potentially misrepresented pre-order demand, ultimately alleging that Lordstown had paid a third-party consultation company called Climb to Glory to generate dubious pre-orders in the hopes that high numbers would help attract more investors.
I mean, you called these on CNBC serious orders.
Well, no, we've always been very clear, right? These are just what they're intended to be, right?
All of this was equivalent to dropping a proverbial bomb on Lordstown's claims of strong demand. But to add insult to injury, Hindenburg concluded their article by publishing Steve Burns' educational records, showing that he had not graduated from Ohio State University as previously inferred, but instead dropped out after 6.5 years. The smear piece did its job. Lordstown's stock fell over 20% on the first day, and another 13% when the company confirmed an SEC investigation resulting from the debacle. But the allegations, combined with first quarter losses of $125 million, were enough for Lordstown to lose business partners and force Burns into early retirement. He resigned from his position as CEO just 3 months after the Hindenburg release. While Lordstown may not have had 100,000 real pre-orders to boost its stock valuation, the company did still have a prototype and an assembly plant, and that meant they still had a shot at being the first electric pickup to market. But that window was closing rapidly. Not only was Rivian close to producing their own EV truck, but Ford announced the F-150 Lightning in May of 2021. This was quite significant to Lordstown's business plan, as the Endurance had been presented as essentially an all-electric alternative to the F-150. In their first public press event, the F-150 is mentioned no less than 3 times.
This truck is equivalent to Ford coming out with a new Ford 150, just to give a generic example, and they announced that he got 75 miles per gallon. Everybody buy that vehicle.
Burns points it out as the #1 selling vehicle in America. A tug-of-war clip provides a rather on-the-nose metaphor for what Lordstown intended to do. But now, with the reveal of the Lightning, Ford had announced they would be building their own all-electric F-150, and it would be hitting dealerships in May 2022, leaving Lordstown just 1 year to get the production Endurance on the road and convince the world that it was still the better option. A tall ask considering the current public opinion of the brand. The demand from fleets may have been a mirage, but if Lordstown could make good on their claim of being the first EV pickup truck, the early arrival could give them the advantage needed to rocket the company into profitability. There was only one problem. The path to production was no longer guaranteed. On the 24th, just days after the Lightning debut, Lordstown announced production volume would be half what they had previously expected, though they were still on track for deliveries in Q4. In addition to the waning strength of their bank account, the company was also facing difficulties with one of the Endurance's biggest innovations, the hub motor. Most traditional electric vehicles, like say Tesla, position the electric motors within the chassis of the vehicle. These motors send rotational torque to the back of the drive unit, where it goes through a series of cogs in the differential. From there, power is divided up between the 2 axles that connect to the wheels. Lordstown took one look at this design and decided they could do better. Instead of having driven axles like every other car in the market, they decided to relocate the electric motors to the hub of the wheel itself, providing 440 horsepower, 8,000 pounds of towing capacity, and all-wheel drive with fewer moving parts. This design massively simplified the mechanical operation of the truck, and they claimed it would reduce the number of moving parts to just 4, the wheels. I hope that count includes the steering wheel. This would hypothetically be a far more efficient design and create much better weight distribution throughout the truck as well. The software independently controlling each motor could also generate the best traction control in its class, one of the few major selling points left that could put the Endurance above the F-150 Lightning. The in-wheel hub motor design was licensed from a small Slovenian company called Elafe. The tech startup claims to have overcome a lot of the problems with a hub motor layout, namely things like unsprung weight and rotational mass, though I'd still recommend watching out for curves and potholes when your entire drivetrain is housed within the wheel. Lordstown hoped to manufacture the Elafe hub motors in-house at the Lordstown assembly plant, but this ultimately proved to be the largest hurdle in production. The technology had never been commercialized at scale before, and obtaining the components for it was a difficult task. For the pre-production prototype cars, Elafe could provide a few motors for testing, but in order to build the Endurance en masse, Lordstown would need to manufacture their own. The motors proved to be such a monumental obstacle that the company allegedly considered ditching the technology altogether, saying, quote, "Not every vehicle needs hub motors and we'll weigh the trade-offs." The production deadline in September came and went, and the Endurance was still nowhere near production. The company finally came forward with a statement in November, pushing the production date to Q3 of 2022. But it was too late. Rivian clinched the title of first production electric pickup with their R1T, and Ford followed soon after with the F-150 Lightning. The race was over, and Lordstown hadn't won. With suppliers failing, a rapidly deteriorating bank account, and investors still reeling from the Hindenburg scandal, Lordstown needed to make some desperate moves if they were to have any hope of ever putting the Endurance into production. With their backs against the wall, the company finally caved and called in help from a third party, Foxconn. Once a manufacturer of electronics, now turned into a major player in the EV startup industry, the Taiwanese brand hopes to one day produce half the world's EVs, and is starting from the ground up by partnering with companies like Fisker and Lordstown. Foxconn agreed to bail out Lordstown and help finally put the Endurance on the road, but it would come at the cost of their factory. In a colossal deal, Lordstown handed over the keys to the kingdom for a whopping $230 million. A lifeline that would be critical to the survival of the company. When the deal was finally inked on May 11th of 2022, Foxconn took the reins for the Endurance, September 29th, 2022. Over a year past the original date, production finally began at the new Foxconn EV plant. The first 2 Endurance trucks rolled off the production line to great applause, having finally overcome the countless development obstacles, supply chain issues, and EPA certifications. The Endurance was finally here, and Lordstown planned to build the first 50 of them before the end of 2022. But then came the recalls. Production was abruptly halted in February 2023, as Lordstown discovered an issue related to the electrical connections in the truck that could cause sudden loss in propulsion. In March, a second recall came out. This time, an electric parking brake had been improperly heat-treated and could allow the vehicle to roll away. Strike 3 would arrive in May, as customers reported the instrument cluster display would freeze on startup. Around the same time, Lordstown would experience another fire. This time, a vehicle in storage went up and damaged 4 other trucks in its blaze. Another blow would come in June, when the EPA released their testing results for the Endurance, revealing a range of just 174 miles, significantly less than the 200 that Lordstown had originally claimed. But the final nail in the coffin came when Foxconn sought to back out of their deal. Lordstown Motors' share price had fallen below $1 for 30 consecutive days, prompting the Nasdaq to file a notice of delisting. If their stock didn't increase in value, the ticker would be removed from the exchange. Lordstown quickly filed for a reverse split to artificially inflate the price, exchanging 15 shares for 1. But it was too late. Foxconn claimed the notice alone was enough to warrant a cancellation of the deal, and refused to purchase the agreed 10% stake in Lordstown, causing them to miss out on an additional $47 million in funding. Production had stopped again and again. The money was gone. The excitement wore off ages ago. The demand was never real to begin with. With no help left and nowhere left to turn, the company called it quits and announced Chapter 11 bankruptcy on June 27, 2023. Although the Endurance gave the illusion of potential at its debut, The reality is that Lordstown Motors never stood a chance. Too much of its success was dependent on being the first to market and on featuring the hub motor technology. Without those, the Endurance was just another untested, slightly unattractive electric pickup truck. Lordstown marketed themselves to F-150 owners as a more efficient alternative to the #1 selling vehicle in America, not knowing that this strategy would make themselves obsolete when Ford simply made their own EV. The only hype Lordstown was able to stir up was provided by politicians who only cared to win voter support from the region and from a misleading pre-order book. When the election was over and the lies were exposed, nobody wanted anything to do with the brand. And even Foxconn couldn't, or at least wouldn't, save them. After entering bankruptcy and having their stock removed from the exchanges, Lordstown filed a lawsuit against Foxconn, alleging that the manufacturing giant hadn't held up their end of the deal and abused the partnership to advance their own business interests. The complex process of corporate restructuring and asset auctioning could take ages, and it's ultimately not clear where the lawsuit will end up. But if one thing can be certain, it's that the Endurance has failed to endure. Thanks for watching.